I feel like I'm really going against the trend on Instagram, especially these days, and it's during that stay that I really learn most of what I know about Irish traditional music today, and a great deal about life as well. And one of my favorite pieces of gear that I bought last year is actually I did get this question several times actually, from both women and men. Hello, and welcome to my very first Q&A video. A big thanks to everyone who sent me questions to answer through YouTube and Instagram. Some really interesting questions. Let's just say they span a wide variety of topics. So I originally planned to do this video outside, maybe go for a walk or something. But unfortunately the weather has turned rather miserable. So we'll have to do this session in my cozy little home studio. But that's alright, I'm ready. I poured myself some warm tea and yeah, let's do this. So we're kicking things off with a rather personal question, but I did tell you could ask me about anything, so it's only fair, I guess. And the first question is, are you single? And I did get this question several times actually, from both women and men. And the answer is yes, I am single. I do feel like adding that I'm also straight. So next question. The next question comes from Patsy Connangton and goes like this. What age were you when you started playing music? What instrument were you attracted to, and who taught you? So I'm going to try to keep this fairly brief, but I started playing music as a teenager, so kind of late in one way. And I started out playing in various bands. My first instruments were piano and keyboard instruments. And in the beginning it was mostly blues and rock music. But eventually when I got into music college, I really discovered jazz, and that became my sort of big passion for the next few years. And this is also around the time where I discovered the Hammond organ, which became my main instrument of sorts. And in 2007, I think, I bought my first very own Hammond organ, and it was a 1961 model 800. And yeah, it's a big beast of an instrument, but I've lugged that thing all over Norway, north to south, east to west, countless times. And to this day, it's still one of my most beloved possessions. After finishing my jazz degree, though, I fairly quickly gave up on my ambitions to becoming a jazz musician for various reasons. And I then spent the next few years playing all sorts of music, really, just to keep afloat. But then the next chapter in my musical life begins when I discover Irish traditional music and totally falls in love with it. And it then became my next big passion in life, obsession even. And I ended up moving to Ireland and spent 2 years in Galway on the west coast. And it's during that stay that I really learned most of what I know about Irish traditional music today, and a great deal about life as well. During this time, I also sort of shifted my focus from keyboard instruments to the piano accordion as my main instrument. Although these days, I don't feel like I have a main instrument anymore, because I play so many instruments now, and yeah, whenever people ask me, I usually tell them that I'm a multi-instrumentalist, whatever that means. After moving back to Norway, though, I started playing a lot with Norwegian traditional musicians, because the different folk music scenes tend to overlap a bit over here. And I have to say, it's been a great experience discovering my own traditional music at such a late stage in my musical career, because back when I was doing the jazz thing, I didn't even know that Norwegian traditional music existed. So yeah, these days I'm doing a mixture between traditional Irish folk music and different crossover projects with Norwegian and Nordic music, and also a great deal of singer-songwriter and different sorts of acoustic music as well. The next question comes from Helge through Instagram. How many languages do you speak? And if you had more free time, what language would you learn then? So I only really speak two, Norwegian and English. And language was never my favorite subject in school. I don't even consider myself a fluent English speaker up until fairly recently. It was a great help though, spending those years in Galway, because I think that the only way to really master the subtleties in a language is to spend a considerable amount of time around native speakers, which I had the chance to do during that stay. Since I do speak at least 2 languages, I am able to appreciate the difference in how we communicate when we use different languages. For example, when I was living in Galway, I had quite a few Danish friends who were also living there at the time. And in case you don't know, the Norwegian and the Danish languages are fairly similar. So similar, in fact, that we can usually understand each other when we speak our respective languages. So, yeah, but when we were living in Galway, we usually spoke English because that was the common language there. But I remember at one point, me and one of my Danish friends started speaking Scandinavian to each other because, yeah, there were no one else around at that point. And it felt almost like getting to know the guy all over again, even though I'd known him for more than a year, because he would express himself so differently when he spoke his native language. So I think that's really something to keep in mind, like how different we come off when we use a different language. When it comes to which language I would learn if I had the time, I'm really intrigued by the Irish language. I think it's such a beautiful language to listen to, and I also think that if I had the greater understanding of it, I would be able to appreciate Irish culture in a much deeper way. But it does sound very difficult, though. It's very different from any language that I have any knowledge of. And also very few people seem to actually speak it. So I think I would go with German. It feels like German is going out of style a bit. And many people even consider it to be an ugly sounding language. But I think it's beautiful though. And it's also a very important language, I think, to understand the European cultural history. So I would definitely go with German. But going back to my previous point, I don't think I would be able to learn it properly unless I spent a considerable amount of time in a German-speaking place. And I don't have any plans to do so in the near future, at least. The next question comes from Luke Webb. He's asking, what equipment, hardware and software do you use to record your videos? And how long does it take to edit the video? Thanks for your question, Luke. What he is referring to there, I think, are my music videos that I post on Instagram and YouTube, where I will film myself playing traditional tunes, mostly. And often I'll multi-track myself with different instruments, and I will use professional lights, and I will color grade and do the whole show. And to answer the second part of your question first, it does take time. Quite a bit of time, actually. Sometimes I feel like I'm really going against the trend on Instagram, especially these days, where everything seems to be very much about sort of in the moment kind of content and being authentic, whatever that means. So most musicians will film themselves playing music with just their phone in a very casual sort of environment, whereas I'm going the completely opposite direction and pushing the production value as high as I can possibly do while being basically a one-man show. And at the end of the day, it's just 2 different approaches to the same thing, which is music. And you can't be everyone's cup of tea. That's just how it is. But I'm really enjoying doing it this way at the moment because I find I'm learning a lot, both in terms of playing music, but also when it comes to video editing and mixing and all that stuff. But yes, it does take time. When it comes to the gear and equipment that I use, I'm going to try to keep this fairly brief as well, because I know that not everyone is as geeky and as big of a gearhead as I am. But since I haven't been taking audio recording and video editing seriously for that long, I haven't yet been able to rack up all that much gear, but I think I'm doing alright. Now, to start with microphones, I have a small but expanding mic cupboard, and I will actually get back to microphones in my next question, so I'll skip over that for now. The sound card audio interface that I use is a Focusrite Claret 8 Pre, which works wonderfully for me. I don't have any need to upgrade that in the near future. The only thing is that sometimes I need more than 8 microphone preamps, so I have to look into a solution for that. And the only other piece of outboard hardware equipment that I own is just a PreSonus headphone amplifier, which allows me to use several pairs of headphones at once, which is handy when I'm recording with other musicians. Besides from that, I don't own any EQs, compressors, fancy preamps, anything like that. But I have a long wish list, so watch this space. Moving on to the computer, I have a 2016 MacBook Pro that I've been using for some years now, and it's been working fine, but I will probably have to upgrade it in a year or two. The DAW or recording software that I use is Logic, which works fine for me. And if you're currently using GarageBand, which is the sort of free recording software that comes with the Apple computers, I would definitely recommend that you upgrade to Logic, because it's not that expensive, and the jump from GarageBand to Logic isn't that hard either, and it unlocks a lot of new possibilities. So yeah, that's my recommendation anyway. And some of the plugins that I use are the FabFilter plugins. I'm a big fan of those, especially their EQ, their compressor, and their reverb plugin. I also like the Valhalla reverb plugins. Moving on to video, I film most of my stuff on a Canon M50 APS-C size sensor mirrorless camera, and I also have a growing collection of lenses. My favorite at the time is the Sigma 16mm 1.4 prime lens, and I would highly recommend this lens if you currently own a Canon APS-C mirrorless camera. I think they make them for Sony cameras as well. And I do most of my editing in Final Cut. And again, if you're currently using iMovie, which is the free software that comes with Apple computers, I would highly recommend that you upgrade to Final Cut, because again, it's not that expensive, and it's not that difficult to learn either when you come from iMovie. It just unlocks so many possibilities. And one of my favorite pieces of gear that I bought last year is actually the Aperture 120D2 light with the light dome softbox. If you're doing any sort of video for YouTube or stuff like that, and you haven't yet invested in proper lights, then you're in for a treat, because it just makes all the difference. And my videos look so much more professional with this light. It's sort of night and day, and it also allows me to have consistent quality no matter which time of day it is or where I am or stuff like that. So great light. I would highly recommend it if you're serious about video. It's a bit pricey though, but people tell me that lights of this quality used to be way more expensive before, so I guess we're lucky that we live in the age that we do. So yeah, I'll definitely look into the Aperture lights if you're serious about video. The next question comes from Carl Schenker and goes like this. Hi, how would you mic an accordion, both ends? Thanks for the great question. This is a topic I have many opinions about, but first of all, a big disclaimer: I'm not the most experienced recording engineer, so if any of you have strong feelings on this subject, please let me know in the comments. I would be really interested in hearing from you. Now, as Carl were getting at there, miking an accordion can be quite challenging because the instrument produces sounds from several different directions at once. I mean, you have the treble side, obviously, and you also have the bass side of the accordion, which actually moves back and forth and up and down, which makes it a bit tricky to capture the sound in a natural way. And I'm gonna divide my answer into two parts, and first talk about how I would mic an accordion in a live situation before I talk about how I would do it in the studio, because they're obviously two very different scenarios. So I find that live, the way I get the best result by far is whenever I'm able to use one of these, a large diaphragm condenser microphone. I find that for the type of gigs that I do, this is the best option for me, because I tend to play with smaller ensembles in small to medium-sized venues, not too many loud instruments on stage, and fairly quiet audience. And I find that this is the way to capture the sound of the instrument in the most natural way. And if I'm using both sides of the accordion actively, I would ideally have two of these, ideally a spaced pair like this. Now, there's a reason why you don't see this kind of microphone on the live stage that much, because they are very prone to feedback issues, and that's why they are most commonly used in the studio. But I know that there are a few companies, most notably Air Trumpet Labs, that make condenser microphones especially for live use, and I've yet to try out one of their microphones, but hopefully I'll be able to get my hand on one of those in the future. Now, if I'm playing in a very loud environment and I'm not able to use the condenser, another option is to go with something like this, a clip-on mic that you attach on top of the accordion. And again, if you're using both sides, you would need at least two, so you have one for each side. And a benefit of this kind of mic is that you're free to move around a lot more, which can be fun. But I find that the sound really suffers. For one, this mic gets way too close to the instrument to be able to capture a natural sound, in my opinion. But I do use this a lot, especially when I'm playing with louder bands and stuff like that. Now, if you're in a very loud situation and you don't have a clip-on mic like that available, then your best option is just to get a dynamic microphone like a Shure SM57 and stick it as close to the instrument as you can get, and hope for the best. When it comes to recording in the studio though, you obviously have loads of options, and I find that for me, my approach is very different when I'm recording the accordion as a solo instrument, playing both sides, and when I'm playing in a traditional Irish music setting. Because if I were using both sides of the accordion actively, I would probably do a similar thing to what I described earlier, having two large diaphragm microphones placed probably as far away from the accordion as I can get away with in the environment that I'm in, to get the most natural sound possible. And I've also seen people use sort of clip-on mic or a pickup of sorts inside the accordion on the bass side, and blend that signal in with the stereo mics. And that way you're able to capture a more constant bass sound, since that side of the accordion moves a lot more than this side. Now, in Irish music, a lot of the time the bass side of the accordion is more like an afterthought than an important part of the overall sound. There are big exceptions, of course, most notably Karen Tweed, who are famous for using the basses in a very creative way, and there are others as well, but at least me personally, I tend to not use them that much, and then it gets even more important for me to capture the treble side in a convincing way. And what I'll do sometimes is actually to record the treble side in stereo. I really like to use a technique called mid-side, which I don't have time to go into now, but you can look it up on YouTube if you're interested. And this is something I will do, especially if the accordion is the main melody instrument in the arrangement. Maybe not so much if there's also fiddles and flutes and a bigger band, but if you want the accordion to have like a big presence in the middle of your mix, that can be a way to go. And I also like my accordion to have a slightly darker tone, so that's why recently I've been using this ribbon mic a lot. This mic, which is a AEA-R84 ribbon, is not as dark as some ribbon mics that I've heard out there, and I find that the sound of this really complements the tone of my accordion in a good way. Of course, all of this is up to personal preference and taste, but I find that the thing that is almost most important is microphone placement, because moving the mic just a few centimeters can really change the tone of the accordion and how bright and how dark it sounds. I haven't even talked about your room, the environment that you record the accordion, which obviously makes a huge difference. As a general rule, if you have a room which isn't treated specifically for recording music, then I would probably put the microphones fairly close to the accordion. Otherwise, you'll get too much of the room sound, and the sound of a small room, an untreated one, is usually not very pleasant. If you have an acoustically treated space though, as I have here, you can generally afford to back the mic a bit further back and get a more natural sound. The next question comes from Aimo and Easy Vlogs. Do you ever come to the UK? To play, I assume, is the whole question. And I have no scheduled gigs in the UK at the moment. And the truth is that I'm focusing most of my energy on making new music at the moment. And I probably won't put that much effort into booking shows until I have a new record out. But when that happens, I will do my very best to get to the UK. And I know you have some really nice folk music festivals there. So if there's anyone from the UK watching, I would greatly appreciate if you would send me some ideas about festivals or clubs, concert series, stuff like that. Please send them my way. Would greatly appreciate it. Okay, so that's it for this Q&A video. Thanks for sending in your questions. I hope I have answered them in a satisfying way. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please let me know, and I might do one of these again in the future. Now, for the upcoming weeks, I have quite a few interesting videos planned, including some new musical collaborations and some much requested tutorials. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.